It's probably an inevitability that the marketing SDR job function within 2 years is going to go away because AI agents can just do this job in a scalable way, in a high quality fashion. They can be trained and never leave your organization, right? They just keep getting better and better over time. And of course, as we all know, your SDR team goes home at 5 p.m., but your website doesn't turn off at 5 p.m. So there is a need to service demand around the clock, which you could never do with humans.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Cory, and today I have with me Kraig Swensrud. He is a prominent entrepreneur and tech executive with more than 20 years of experience, and he's best known as the founder and CEO of Qualified.com, a conversational sales and marketing platform designed to enhance pipeline generation for businesses. In 2023, he founded Get Feedback, which was later acquired by SurveyMonkey. And Kraig also served as the CMO of a little-known company called Salesforce, overseeing global corporate and product marketing, playing a crucial role in driving Salesforce's hybrid growth during this period. Kraig, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Cory. Appreciate you having me on the program today.
Yeah. We were chatting a little bit beforehand, and it seems like we've got a lot of exciting things to get into. But first, I want to help our audience get to know you a little bit on a personal level. So kind of walk us through your career journey. You've been at the forefront of innovation and marketing, sales, RevOps. What first drew you to the space?
I graduated from college at UC Berkeley in the late 1990s. And so my first job out of college, I was like an engineering major. I'm like, I should probably go to work for a big tech company. And I went to work at Oracle, which was the largest enterprise software company in the world at that time. And I just sort of felt like, wow, I'm going to spend my whole career doing this. The internet had just emerged. The internet had just started to make its way into enterprise software. And I'm like, wow, I was just like born for this moment because the future is clearly the internet. And so I worked for a couple big tech companies. I worked at Oracle and SAP, which was like the third biggest software company at the time. I made a run at a web services company, which was super successful during the dot-com heyday. And when that company sort of ran its course, I was faced with the dilemma of like, what should I do next? And I was in my late 20s. I thought I was going to go to business school. I thought that's what I should do to kind of get ahead in my career. And I had a crazy friend who was like, you know what, you shouldn't go to business school. We should start a company. You're never going to be able to learn in business school how to start a company in Silicon Valley because there's no guidebook. There was no case studies. The only way to learn about how to start a tech company and be an entrepreneur was to actually just do it. So we set up shop in San Francisco and I started my first company. It was a company called Keyed, and we made a play about integrating Google AdWords and Salesforce. In terms of sales and marketing, the two biggest cloud applications that had emerged onto the scene, Salesforce obviously was the dominant kind of CRM application, but then Google was actually transforming marketing with Google AdWords and also Google Docs and Gmail were making its way into the enterprise. So we decided, hey, somebody has to connect the dots between this brand new marketing system, Google, and this brand new Salesforce automation system, Salesforce. And so we did that. And we ultimately sold that company to Salesforce in 2006. Stayed there for 7 years, as you mentioned, ultimately became CMO, and then had the entrepreneurial bug once again. And I started Get Feedback in customer service, which I was really passionate about, and ultimately qualified in 2018, which has kind of led me to where we're at today. And I've seen kind of all the movements. I've been a huge part of the cloud computing revolution, have seen social media and mobile computing and the Internet of Things, and boom, now here we are in the age of AI. And even though I've had a very full and lengthy career, I couldn't be more excited about what's happening in the world right now.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I want to dig in. What was it like when you said, okay, I'm not going to business school. I'm going to start this company. I'm going to connect, right? This thing called Salesforce, and not many people have heard about yet. Google's coming out. You're going to connect those two. How long did you give yourself, to make that a success?
We gave ourselves 6 months. And my co-founder said, look, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if we start a company? The worst thing that's going to happen is we're going to get nowhere. and by the way, we worked out of his living room. So we're going to sit in my apartment for 6 months and we're going to burn through a certain amount of money. We're going to get nowhere. And the worst thing that's going to happen is you can go to business school after that. And so that was kind of like the fallback plan. But of course, like I never ended up on the fallback plan. I just ended up kind of going down the path of being an entrepreneur and seeing this huge movement come along, which was cloud computing. And yes, at that time, nobody really knew who Salesforce was. It wasn't like a public household name. Nobody actually really knew how Google made their money. They thought it was just like a search engine, but no, they actually made a ton of money by companies advertising on that search engine. And the key idea was, how do you tie advertising spend to revenue? Because for B2C companies, you might click on a Google ad and then end up on a e-commerce checkout shopping cart. But as we all know, for B2B companies, you have to run a sales cycle. That all happens and gets tracked in Salesforce. So tying those two things together was like probably a pretty big innovation at its time. And obviously now we have tons of SaaS apps and agents that are all interconnected. Now that feels like the norm, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, talk to me about Salesforce for a second, because you were acquired in 2006. That's a couple years after their IPO, right? And I think during your tenure, if I'm right, Salesforce went from around 500 million in revenue to over 3 billion. So a little bit of an increase. What were those years like?
It was a crazy, wild ride. It was crazy. And Salesforce was the company that was leading this movement to, originally we called it software as a service, where instead of buying your software previously, you had to purchase a perpetual perpetual license to the software, install it in your own data centers, operate it with people that you hired, and then you paid for maintenance and bug fixes and updates. Salesforce was preaching software as a service, which ultimately kind of became recoined cloud computing as everything was moving onto the internet. And that was 2006 was right about that time we sort of crossed the chasm into the mainstream market. Salesforce was operating for many years before that in this kind of early adopter market. But right about that time, it sort of crossed the chasm and boom, it just took off. And that enabled us also to expand our product portfolio beyond Salesforce automation, the namesake application, into customer service and support and marketing automation and analytics and social media and mobile computing and all of these different things right about that time. So the company became multi-product. That was super fun to kind of ultimately be part of the product marketing team and running marketing as we saw that international expansion, that product expansion, and the mainstream adopt cloud computing. It was the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Okay, so let's fast forward. Enough with that. Thank you for answering my question. I'm deeply intrigued about that time period. But so Qualified. So when you started Qualified, what was the big gap in the market or the frustration that you zeroed in on that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the questions about my experience at Salesforce, because when I was CMO, as we all know, CMOs own a certain portion of a revenue team's pipeline number. So typically there's like a marketing generated pipeline number, which a CMO is responsible for. And there's a sales generated pipeline number, which the CRO is responsible for. And so if you kind of divvy those up, I was the CMO and I owned the marketing generated pipeline number. I had a budget to the tune of $100 million in program spend. That means advertising, commercials, events, social media, everything that I wanted to do kind of had to fit within that budget envelope. And it was a time when the world was switching from a call to action on marketing campaigns to being like, pick up the telephone and call me, to just go to my website to learn more. The website became the centerpiece of all marketing activity. It was in the solar system of B2B marketing. The website was like the sun. Everything we were telling people to do was like driving visitors to my website. And that's where I would generate my pipeline. So I put forms all over my website and said, hey, if you want a free trial, fill out this form. If you want to talk to sales, fill out this form. If you'd like a custom demo, fill out this form. If you want to download a book, fill out this form. If you want to attend an event, fill out this form. Those became the leads that the inside sales team would then work that would turn into pipeline. Well, guess what? One quarter, we missed the number. And up until that point, had just been a string of quarters where we were blowing out the number, right? The company was super successful. It wasn't even a worry. Of course, we're going to meet the pipeline number, but one quarter we missed. And I sat down on an executive call and the finger kind of came pointing at me. This was not when we were on Zoom. We were all physically in person. So you can imagine the finger pointing from across the table saying, Kraig, what happened? And I was a little bit cockier at the time. And I said, you know what? Actually, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I'm the chief marketer at one of the world's, if not the world's greatest enterprise software company. And I don't know. And why didn't I know? I didn't have any technology that could tell me who was on my website, how many people from what companies were on my website, what were they looking at, what did they do, how long did they spend there, did they convert into a free trial, or did they want to contact sales, or were they just poking around and learning? I didn't know. And every lead that was generated was worked by a human SDR. Think of like 22, 23, 24-year-old young professionals who would respond to these leads. So not only did I not know who was there, I was hoping that the leads that we generated were actually followed up with on time, because speed typically matters. And I hoped that those people showed up to work that day and actually worked their queue of leads. It was just hope. And obviously, as we all know, hope is not a strategy. And so that feeling of missing the number, not knowing why, and hoping that a team of young professionals who I depended upon to hit my number were doing their job, that feeling stuck with me for years and years and years. And ultimately, when we decided to start Qualified, we came back to this simple idea that marketers need to be in control of the pipeline number. And there has to be an easier, more technically sophisticated way to do this. And then as we were building this product, came along AI, Gen AI. And all of a sudden, like, the doors opened, and now we see an entirely new way to generate pipeline. That's what we're focused on at Qualified.
Yep. I want to say it's an age-old problem. It's not an age-old problem. It's a 15-year-old problem. However, I think a lot of people are still stuck, marketing leaders, particularly in that cycle that you just mentioned, right? We have our form fills, we call them MQLs, we call them whatever, we throw them over to the table to SDRs, we say, go get them. And then we just sit back and hope.
Whose ass is on the line if that doesn't happen?
The sales team, right?
It's the CRO and the CMO who suffer because they don't have the pipeline they need. And so, that you mentioned like 15 years, that's probably about right. It was sort of like the late 2000s when everyone decided we're going to do everything digitally. We're going to do all of our marketing digitally, email campaigns, social media campaigns, LinkedIn campaigns, Google campaigns, like all the digitally. What I mean by that is like it appears on the internet, and all of those clicks on those ads drive to our website, and the forms that are on our website, and the scoring rules and the MQLs and all that stuff you talked about with SDRs. Basically, everybody copied the same model 15 years ago. And we've been sitting there with this model. And all of a sudden, we have an entirely new replatforming of technology called AI. And of course, it was brought to us originally by OpenAI with ChatGPT. It was like 2 years ago. ChatGPT became the fastest growing app in the history of apps. And on that day, if you're an executive, certainly if you're a CEO of a software company, you had to wonder, how is the world going to change? But actually, many C-level executives didn't think that on that day. And they wondered, how is it going to change? What am I supposed to do? And so there have been a lot of companies that have been in this kind of paralyzed state of, I know I need to change, I know I need to evolve, but I don't really know how. So the model that I've been using for the last 15 years, it's sort of working. Let me just stick with that. And I think that's why 2025, like the day that we're recording this podcast here, it's like a really important moment in time, because I think this is the year C-level executives are changing how they think, and they're changing what's possible in their organization, and they're changing their workflow. And I think like everything's on the table.
Yeah, I think so. I think people are waking up to that reality pretty quickly. And so when you look at the organizations that are still quote unquote stuck in that old model, where would you say the biggest inefficiencies lie? Is it the outdated marketing data? Is it the fact that we're still, taking these people, like you said, these young professionals that are right out of college and expecting them to do one of the hardest jobs in sales? Where exactly can you pinpoint where the problem is?
For the marketing funnel, and I'm not talking about like BDR prospecting and sales outbounding into their target accounts. I'm specifically talking about the marketing funnel of everything that rolls through the CMO, everything that rolls through the website, everything that rolls through, millions or hundreds of $1 million of marketing spend that's designed to generate pipeline for sales. So if we're kind of focused on that, the biggest sticking point has been our reliance on this team of human SDRs. Now, I'm old enough to know why we created this team back in the day. And it was, we started generating all this demand digitally and we weren't picking up the telephone anymore. And so we're like, well, who should follow up with the leads? And initially people said, well, maybe it should be the sales team. Like, we're generating these leads for our account executives, right? Why won't they follow up with the leads? But they're like, well, I'm really busy working deals. And like, you want me selling, right? You don't want me like qualifying leads. You want me selling, right? So we're like, of course we want you selling. And then it got kicked back to the marketing team and we're like, well, why don't you guys do it? And they're like, well, I'm running events and I'm like running campaigns and I'm doing creative and I'm running Super Bowl commercials. Like, you want me to stop doing that to follow up with leads? So it became like a new team that was formed. And it's actually not that difficult, which is why we're able to hire these right out of college, maybe 1 or 2 years worth of work experience, these young professionals, because it's kind of this repetitive task. But here's the problem, is that it's incredibly expensive to staff up this team. So, for example, an average SDR in North America costs about $80,000. Maybe you pay them like $60,000 in a base salary and $20,000 in like commissions when they hit their target. But also then when you add on their benefits and payroll taxes and you give them a desk and you give them a computer and you fly them to kick off and you do all these things, like, let's call it $100,000 just as a nice round number, maybe 80 on the low end, 120 on the high end. So if you've got a team of 5 of these people, that's, call it like $500,000 of spend, which is why people didn't hire armies of them, because they're really expensive. But the reality is they can only do so much. They can only work like 250 leads with quality per month. But the more leads you have, the more you need to hire. And so there became this issue with like the cost of this team, the capacity of how much they could work. There also was then an issue of, speed. How fast could they work these leads? Obviously, we all know in our industry, speed to lead is super important. So you want them to work them fast. Like, you don't want them to wait till next week to follow up with a hot lead from today. And then kind of the fourth issue is the quality. Can you imagine hiring a 23-year-old young professional right out of college and expecting them to know everything about your products, everything about your customers, everything about your sales cycles, everything about your market, everything about the competition? It's impossible. And so the quality is actually pretty mediocre with these folks. And if they're really good, if they're exceptional, they get promoted in 9 months. So it's this constant revolving door of brand new people, training these people, hoping they're good, rejecting some of them, promoting some of them. And you never end up with a team of people that is stable and is exceptional. And you combine that with the fact that there's a limited capacity, a high cost. And so this has always been the conundrum. Those 15 years you talked about, Cory, like the fact that people have been doing this for 15 years, the conundrum is like, I guess that's just what I have to do. And there's no alternative. But finally, for the first time in 15 years, the alternative is here. And the alternative has been brought forth by AI and now AI agents.
So we're here. So what does this AI-driven marketing funnel look like? Obviously, there's a huge emphasis on the AI SDRs, but are we talking like there's a human SDR running 10 of these, there's a human SDR running 100 of these? Is there, what's the level of input to human to AI, and how should we think about those interacting when we talk about lead gen?
I think it's probably an inevitability that the marketing SDR job function within 2 years is going to go away, because AI agents can just do this job in a scalable way, in a high quality fashion. They can be trained and they'll never leave your organization, right? They just keep getting better and better over time. And of course, as we all know, your SDR team goes home at 5 p.m., but your website doesn't turn off at 5 p.m. So there is a need to service demand around the clock, which you could never do with humans. So if you assume that within a few years, the marketing SDR function is going to go away, those people are going to get promoted or they're going to move on because they don't like sales and marketing or something. And then organizations are going to decide, like, I'm probably not going to backfill them. I'm going to use that money to run another marketing campaign or to hire an events person, or I'm going to get more value with that money I would spend because an AI agent is now there for that. Do you remember in the 2009, Apple ran this campaign that said, like, there's an app for that? And there was always like an app for everything. Well, now here we are 15 years later, and now there's an AI agent for that. And then companies are going to be able to spend their money in more effective ways. If I was a CMO today, I would hire an agent to run the SDR job function And I would take that cost savings and dump it back into my marketing campaigns. And I would sponsor more events and I would run more advertising and I would generate more pipeline for my sales organization. So I think that's what's going to happen. That's sort of like an inevitability in my mind. But how are we going to get there? It's not just you're not going to snap your fingers and make it happen. It's going to be a crawl, walk, run type of phased approach. And that's what we're seeing right now. So for example, my company, we create an AI SDR for marketers. Her name's Piper. That's the name of the agent. Her name is Piper because she generates pipeline. So hopefully we're connecting the dots for people on that. And more than 400 companies have already hired Piper in the last almost 12 months that she's been in existence. That level of pickup is so fast. It's almost unlike anything I've seen since the dawn of cloud computing, where we saw the same level of pickup and interest just because the value prop is so compelling. But people are doing a crawl, walk, run approach with Piper. So at first they might say, hey, Piper, why don't you work nights and weekends? Because my human team doesn't do that. And then they get comfortable with the technology and they go, why don't you follow up with the leads from my event sponsorships? Because my human team says those are low quality. They don't want to do that. Cool. Well, Piper can do that. She doesn't care what's low quality. She can just get to work. And then they get comfortable and they go, okay, I want to do the next thing. I want to give them maybe my SMB traffic, or I want to give them all my SMB leads. And they work up and they work up and they realize, wow, Piper can actually do it all. But they have to get that level of comfort over some period of time. That's why this is going to be like an evolution for sales and marketing organizations.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's like you said, 2009, there was an app for that. Now, 2025, there's an AI agent for that. And yet, just like with apps, right, the quality of those AI agents can sometimes vary. And so I think that a lot of people are in that testing mode, like you said, right? We might throw out event leads, we might throw out SMB leads, but then once it works, once people are comfortable, once it deserves and earns its spot, things are going to change a lot. While we're doing this, while we're kind of playing this game, like, okay, let's just say we get rid of the SDR function from a marketing funnel perspective. I was intrigued. I saw a post of yours a few weeks ago where I think you were at a dinner with other CMOs, and one of the topics that came up was maybe the death is too far, but certainly the decline of marketing automation platforms. So do you see that as being another shift that's kind of coming? Are Ketos, are Pardots of the world, are they gonna go away as well? And if so, what's going to replace them?
Well, we're clearly in a time where there's innovation that's happening. That's clear. The marketing organizations, like any organization, they kind of need a system of record. Classically, that has been marketing automation platforms. As you mentioned, Marketo and Pardot and HubSpot and Eloqua, and there are actually many others. Now, what did those systems actually do? They became a system of record for leads and accounts, and they tried to track activity against those leads and accounts, and they tried to tie marketing campaigns to those leads and accounts. And when there was enough buying interest, so-called buying interest, meaning they were scored high, then they were kicked over to this team of human SDRs who would work them. Okay, well, is that changing? Absolutely. 100%. All of that is changing. And undoubtedly, the innovation is happening with AI. And so, for example, I shouldn't need to score a leader account anymore with numbers. Oh, they came to my website, +5 points. They filled out this form, +10 points. It's no, there's no points. The AI should be constantly scoring these people all the time. And the AI should be determining not if they reach a certain score, give them to a human SDR. That's how all these systems work. If they reach a score, give them to a human, let the human SDR, follow up with them. The AI should constantly be scoring, and then the AI can actually be communicating. Not when they reach a certain score, but all the time. Nurturing them down the funnel. If, for example, somebody attends an event, let's say I do a webinar, somebody comes to my webinar, what should happen after that moment? The AI should know, based on every single thing that person has done, every single thing everybody in their company has done, are they a customer? Are they a partner? Are they a prospect? Is it an open opportunity? Is it a dead lost opportunity? Oh man, maybe they actually use my competitor's software, but maybe they came to my webinar. What should I do? And the AI, only an AI can be smart enough to do that. Only an AI agent like Piper can be smart enough to do that. There's literally not a human SDR in the world who has the time to do all that research and be all-knowing to actually craft the perfect message at the right time. One of our customers, SUSE, this guy, Levi Warts, his job title just changed to AI go-to-market expert. That's now his job title. He's Piper's boss. He's like, one-to-one personalization at hyperscales never before been possible. It's like been the dream thing everybody has talked about. Can I send the right message, the right communication, have the right conversation with the right person at the right company at the right time, and be all knowing about everything they've ever done in interaction with my company? That's a dream. It's never before, as he said, it's never before been possible until now. And it's the AI agents that make it possible. So back to your question, what's going to happen to marketing automation platforms? They're inevitably going to evolve. And inevitably, this kind of technology that like Qualified and companies like us are bringing to the table are going to fuse with them. So, for example, we just launched a couple weeks ago Piper for Marketo, because Marketo is like an incumbent marketing automation solution, but they need this new stuff too. So I think we're going to work hand in hand, and it's going to evolve into a new set of platforms. I'm calling them agentic marketing platforms, because there's going to be some new acronym for what they are.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely a plausible shift. So I'm curious. So in the example that you just mentioned, this guy who is Piper's boss, essentially, what kind of metrics is he tracking?
I'll give you an example of what we do is we put Piper on the leaderboard. This is what most companies do when I say crawl, walk, run. Of course, everybody has a leaderboard. Every SDR organization has a leaderboard. And usually there's a weekly meeting. We call it Pipeline Council at our company. I'm sure it's called different things at different companies. We call it Pipe Council. And we have it every Friday. And every Friday we go through all the metrics, the pipeline generated, the sources, what we did, where it came from. But it always ends with all of the human SDRs on the team and how much pipe they generated from the leads they were given, month to date, quarter to date. Every company's done this for like 15 years. Step one, when you hire an AI SDR agent like Piper, put her on the leaderboard. And then you give her a certain amount of leads and you go, hey, Piper, work these. And then you see her and you give her a little bit more and a little bit more. And you watch Piper climb up the leaderboard. Those are like the metrics. The metrics ultimately are pipeline generation. But of course, you got to track it back to things before you generate an opportunity, which would be how many conversations have you had? How many meetings have you booked? And ultimately, like how much pipeline have you generated?
That makes sense. So what would you say when companies are looking into that example that you just mentioned, right? They're thinking, okay, we want to do this. We want to do the crawl, the walk, the run, and really implement AI into our funnel. Well, I guess what are some of their concerns? One, that you commonly run across, and two, what mistakes should they be looking out for?
The first concerns, and this was pretty rampant a year ago, I think 2024, we all started off thinking about like autonomous agents. And if you remember, actually, 2023 was really like the year of the Copilot. Remember, everybody was talking about Copilots, and Microsoft had a Copilot, and GitHub had a Copilot, and we all had Copilots, which is like the first wave of Gen AI. There was going to be a ride-along Copilot helping the human user be better at their job. And then 2024 came about, and everybody was talking about autonomy and autonomous agents. It went from Copilots to things running on autopilot, kind of like the cars in San Francisco, the taxi cabs in San Francisco. There's no human behind the wheel. Like they disappeared. They're running on autopilot. But when you first experience that and you talk to a software company who claims they can do that, there's a level of trust you just do not have. And that's why it's essential that as we all move forward in this world, there is a crawl, walk, run approach. Nobody's going to go from, sitting down to running. You got to start by crawling. So that crawl phase is validation of the technology. Does it work? How does it work? And I think that's what's important right now is for software companies like us and in our peer group, we have to show up with the goods. This is not a marketing pitch. We have to get in there and we have to show you our software. First, it starts with a custom demo. Then it starts with a workshop to say, how did we build this? How did we think about it? How is it going to work for you? Where does it fall down? Where do we not trust it yet? Where should you experiment? Then we get in, we map it to their go-to-market organization and their workflows and their processes. And then they see it working in their environment. Then they have to get comfortable with it. So they have to see how Piper is talking. Then they might want to adjust her language or her tone or, yo, Piper, you're being a little pushy there. I know your goal is to book a meeting with a target account. Feels like you're being a little too pushy. Back off a little bit, right? And then you hone that in and you get comfort saying like, yeah, this actually works for this subset of my lead volume or my website traffic. Let me turn up the dial a little bit. And then companies have been on that journey with us, for example, for a year, and they're still in their crawl, walk, run, journey. And some people are like fully running. they've like actually don't even have a team of marketing SDRs at all anymore. It's crazy actually to think about that there's companies already there, but the vast majority of them are somewhere kind of on that journey.
Yeah, intriguing. So, what would you say to those companies? And I've heard a few of these stories recently where, particularly companies in more regulated, heavily regulated industries, right, that are still, they bought in from a use case perspective, right? They're intrigued by the technology, but they're a little hesitant, a little scared even of it running rampant in their systems. What would you say to alleviate those fears? Or is there a good playbook and examples that people can use?
Well, first of all, what I would say of just somebody being in the industry for as long as I have is like, you just have to go. Like, how long are you going to sit on the sidelines before you even experiment? Because AI years are like dog years. Every year, like the last year, it wasn't even a year ago that we brought our AI SDR agent Piper to market. It was April 16th of last year. So about a year ago, right? And the last year has felt like 7 years in the software industry, which is obviously already a fast-paced, high velocity industry. And this thing is moving so fast that if you sit around for a year or 18 months and go, I don't know, like you're going to get left behind because everybody else is going to be light years ahead of you. It's not that you need to bring something to production if like you're in a more regulated industry, but you have to be experimenting right now because you don't even know what's possible until you start tinkering with this technology. So anyway, my call to action is like for everybody, get going. I look at like my own journey as a software CEO 2 years ago when ChatGPT became the fastest growing app in the history of apps. That was like a call to action for me. I knew I was facing, like every other CEO of a software company, an innovator's dilemma. Innovate or die. That's what happens in our industry, right? And I'm like, I need to pivot my company right now. But the companies that waited even a year to make that pivot, they are now way behind, like way behind. And it's all moving so fast. So my call to action in general, whether you're in marketing or you're in sales or you're listening to this show and you're in some other function of the company, you have to stick your toe in the wall and you have to educate yourself and you have to try to move your company forward because it's going to take some time, but the industry is moving so fast. You got to act now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an excellent point because when you brought up Copilot, it was funny because my brain didn't go to 2023. My brain went to 2020.
Exactly.
Which just
Right.
reinforces your point, right? That we're moving at a 5 to 7 year every year pace, and the cost of inaction is going to quickly be so much more than the cost of a little quick experimentation on failure early on.
And boards are demanding it.
Yeah.
But a year ago, a board meeting went like this. Let's go around the table and talk about what your AI strategy. Oh, you don't know? Okay, try to figure it out by the next board meeting. Now it's like you can't show up to a board meeting without a strategy or you're going to be fired. No matter what C-level position you're in at a company, you're fired because everybody knows if you have not already taken action, you're putting the company at risk. So that's sort of the state of the union right now.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Kraig, as we move toward the end of the podcast, I'm very excited for what you're going to say to this question because we ask every guest 2 questions. And the first is, as you pointed out, we're recording this in April of 2025. So look out 5 years from now, right? 5 dog years from now. What is something that's coming for particularly the marketing organization that we don't foresee right now?
Well, it's impossible to forecast 5 years. I respect the question, but for example, if you had asked me 5 years ago, there's no way I think I would have said, there's going to be AI agents running around in our marketing organization. But you can pretty
That's
much
fair.
see the path for the next couple of years, which is the AI, foundational technologies and LLMs are moving at an insanely rapid pace. Like they're going from being able to spit out words and massive hallucinations to pretty good responses to exceptional responses now to reasoning. Okay. And that's all happened in a super fast period of time. Where are we going to be in 2 years from now? We're going to be able to trust these things 100% given the guardrails that we put them in. So now think about your marketing organization and all the activities being orchestrated, not by a journey builder, these like tools that say step 1, the customer's going to fill out a form. Step 2, you're going to email them. Step 3, you're going to invite them to your event. Like, no way. Like that stuff is going to look so archaic that what's going to happen is A marketing organization is going to be orchestrated by intelligent agents who are making decisions and reasoning on the fly for not just one account and one lead. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and a woman got up from a Fortune 500 company, B2B company, and bragged, I have 16 million leads in my database. It was like a mic drop moment. She was like, Matt, we might be the biggest in the world, right? And can you imagine like orchestrating that with flows and saying like, I think this person's going to do that, or let me give it to a human to follow up with them all, or figure out what do I invite them to at the right moment in time? No way. I mean, but what's going to happen is the agents are going to be all knowing, they're going to be all seeing, and they're going to be reasoning to say, what is the best way for me to engage with this person who's shown a little bit of interest, who downloaded a book, who came to an event, for whom I had a dead lost opportunity last year. So they bought my competitor, but boom, they're back on my website. What should I do? The agents are going to be doing that reasoning, and the tools are not going to have UIs. You know how all these like SaaS products, like the marketing automation platforms you mentioned, they all have UI. The UI is for the human, like to do things. Well, that's all going to be gone too. There's going to be a UI to manage the AI, and who's going to, like I said, who's going to be Piper's boss. There's going to be a UI to ask questions to understand what is going on. What did you do? Why did you do it like that? What's going on with this account? So the software is going to be totally different, and the way that we execute our marketing is going to be totally different.
Wow. That's an excellent answer. Okay. Final question for you.
Sure.
Now, from the outside, it looks like you've had an incredible career, but I'm thinking there might have been one or two, at least speed bumps along the way. So if you go back 10, 5, I don't know, 15 years even, what is one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self?
Let me rattle off a couple maybe, because one thing I would have told my younger self is to play the long game. I think when you're in your 20s, maybe your early 30s, you're kind of looking for the quick win. And you're not thinking about what's going to happen in your career a decade from now. You're trying to make the best decisions you can make sort of in the moment. And what I have learned being in the technology industry, even though it seems huge, even though there's hundreds and thousands of companies worldwide, any industry is actually much smaller than you think. So play the long game means like you're out to win in the long term. And every connection you make is going to come back to pay off. I can't tell you how many people that I know right now that are movers and shakers in our industry I met when I was 25, 26, 29, 31. And what happens over the course of time is that each generation who connects with one another in their 20s and 30s, that becomes the next generation that leads the whole industry. And so it's funny now, I now know the CMOs and the CROs and the CEOs of the technology industry because I sort of grew up with them. And if you play the long game and you think of the fact that like your career is this journey, it's not like a quick win and you're going to be out and sitting on a beach or something. If you play the long game, you build the relationships, you don't burn any bridges, it's all going to come back to pay off. Everything you do between 25 and 35 is going to come back to pay off between 35 and 45 and even longer. So that's kind of number one, play the long game. The number two thing is I would have taken more risk. And I know that sounds crazy from like a 3-time entrepreneur, which is like most people go like, you quit your job and you just started a company with your own money. Like that's already sounds pretty risky, but I would have actually taken more risk. And what I mean by that is every time I've taken a risk, very rarely have I regretted it because it's usually a two-way door. If you take a risk and you get it wrong, whatever, like I was mentioning about starting a company, whatever, you spend 6 months doing it, you realize it was a bad call and you move on to something else. If you play it safe and you end up in the same job for a long period of time, I'm not saying the same company, I mean the same role, you're not challenging yourself to go do the next thing. And so I look back on my career and I'm like, I would have done more jobs. Like I did sales and I did marketing and I did product management, but like I would have done a tour of duty in finance. I would have done a tour of duty in customer success because all these things prepare you to be a great executive over time. And those risks that you take, they help you move your career forward. And they're not as big of a risk as one might think in the moment.
Yeah, I think it's excellent advice. In particular, I want to zero in on the point of, building your network early on in your mid-20s, right? And building kind of a community of the people around you that are at the same level that you are. It's like you said, 15 years later, you're all going to rise to the top. You're all going to know each other. You can support each other along the way, and those relationships are going to be invaluable.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, Craig, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, just find me on LinkedIn, Kraig Swensrud. I'm happy to connect with anybody in your show, specifically entrepreneurs. I love to connect with founders and CEOs and share war stories just to make us all more successful. So, Cory, appreciate you having me today. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks again, Kraig. Take care.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.